Well, good morning to all of you on our social media platforms. Yes, it's true. We are live on our social media platforms right now. We're going to be live on TV here in just a few minutes. Dr. Jim here with meteorologist Carissa Kloss. And we're going to be talking this morning. Boy, we got so much to talk about this morning. I think it's going to go quickly. I mean, obviously the biggest story on planet Earth right now.
Literally, the whole globe.
It really is the tsunami that's been going on, or at different levels in different places.
Right. This is one of those, like, we're not trying to freak people out because the wave heights are manageable, but it's still prudent to heed the advisories and the warnings that are out there. We're going to tell you kind of the wave heights that we've seen out of this so far and kind of how a tsunami works too, because it's a little bit different than what you think. It's not just one big wave.
You know, it's interesting too. Yesterday, we were talking about the swells that were coming from New Zealand up towards Hawaii. And, you know, that's weather related, actually. But this is the opposite. Now we have tsunami swells coming down from the north towards the other side of Hawaii. So that is definitely something we're going to be talking about.
And oh, by the way, two named storm systems in the Central Pacific and the Eastern Pacific, with kind of one right after the other. We've got a lot of tropical talk with our favorite hurricane hunter, Josh Morgerman. We're going to be checking in with him too.
Yeah, you can't forget about that. And so, by the way, if you want to be able to watch us live on TV, but you can keep watching us live here anyway, you can click on that QR code, and there's all the different platforms that you can watch us. Roku, Apple, I'm really bad with all those names. I will be honest.
Pluto TV, Amazon Fire. I've got half of those apps on my phone right
Pluto,
here.
iPhone.
So take us with you. Maybe you're riding the train this morning. Hang out with us and make sure you interact. That's why I've got my computer here, to be able to talk to everybody and see what's going on. And see what they're saying.
We want to know your questions. We want to know what you're thinking about the weather. If you have a complaint about the weather, well, I love complaints. Krista doesn't so much. She doesn't like whiners, but I don't care.
Maybe it's because I have two young kids, so whining is just kind of like always.
Well, I'm my wife's young kid, but I don't have an excuse anymore. The other thing, because we got to talk about this too quite a bit. The heat. Yes. All right. I mean, we're talking. It's what, the last day of July. Today and tomorrow's the last day, couple of days of July. We are really feeling it. Over 150 million people under some type of heat advisory or excessive heat warning, and none of that is going anywhere for a couple of days.
Yeah, and I think everybody's completely tired of it. So if you're complaining, chances are that's what you're complaining of. But it is a very sneaky weather-related killer. In fact, it kills more people than any other weather-related hazard. And I think it's because it's one, I don't want to say we don't take it seriously, because we do, but it's just one that by the time you figure it out, it's too late.
Well, and also because how the headlines work, when you have a tornado, that's big news. When you have a hurricane or even flooding, as we've been talking about a lot lately, it makes the headlines. But heat is just everywhere, right? And so it's not like you have some violent event that happens. It's like people, slowly happens at home alone or in other areas. So
yeah, so we're going to be talking about that. We're bringing in Tracy Anthony. She's got some deep dives, which I'm really interested, because she's going to talk about how heat is impactful in your everyday life in ways that you don't know. Plus, we've been saying derecho a lot this week. Another one of those $10 weather words that we're going to dig into too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of fun. And keep in mind, again, we're doing this live on our social media platforms, so you can interact with us. Also with Josh, as we have Josh here in just a little bit, that will be joining us. Of course, we're going to talk about all things tropical. Of course, right now, the Pacific, the Eastern Pacific is where all the action is. Still quiet in the Atlantic, but how long can that last?
And hopefully a very long time.
Yeah.
Because I'm not ready for it. But the Eastern Pacific, Central Pacific is where it's at. And to me, it's like all Hawaii, 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 Hawaii. So we really want to make sure that you're informed on all the top weather stuff. And honestly, when you're at the water cooler today, you're going to be the coolest person, because you're going to know what's up.
Yeah, not only that, but you're also going to know some more personal information about us, our personal ties right now to Hawaii. Why I am really, really concerned.
Your daughter's there.
My daughter's there. We'll talk about that a little bit
But she'll
too.
be fine. She'll be okay.
No. In fact, the moment I heard, I was on the phone with her. I was telling my wife to text her while I was. We're going to talk about that later. Okay. So tune in. We're about to go live on television. Good morning and welcome to Weather Nation. We've got a lot to talk about today. Of course, we're starting off with the biggest story on planet Earth, which is a tsunami. I'm Dr. Jim Siebert, and joining me alongside me here is meteorologist Krista Kloss. We are live on all of our social media platforms this morning because we want to interact with you. We want your questions, your comments. Also, as we're talking about right now, the tsunamis.
Yeah, caused by an 8.8 magnitude earthquake in Russia. And if you ever question how the entire globe's water systems, earth systems, atmosphere are all connected, this is a great example because one of the top 10 strongest recorded earthquakes on record, sending that wave, sending that tsunami across the oceans. So at one point in time yesterday, we had tsunami warnings from Alaska to Hawaii and even tsunami advisories and watches up and down the West Coast.
Yeah, and those advisories are still in effect. And so it's not over. Now, thank goodness, we really have not had the damage. Like what we're looking here is in Russia, where they immediately had the tsunami coming on shore. We haven't seen that in Hawaii. We haven't seen that on the West Coast. But we have seen, now, even if the wave was only a few inches, it would still be considered a tsunami wave. But we've seen waves going up to about 5 feet in and around the the Hawaiian Islands. And then we've seen maybe a little bit more along the Aleutian Islands, as you would expect, because that's closer to Russia, but also it's pretty rural out there.
So this morning, we still have those tsunami advisories in Hawaii because we're still seeing those series of waves because a wave is not one, a wave is many. And so we're still seeing those making their way through the Hawaiian Islands. We already have, as we've talked about, seen 3, 5+ foot waves working their way on shore. For the West Coast, it's mostly just those advisories out there right now, but there have been a couple of spots right along the northern California coast that are still under those warnings, right around the Crescent City area.
Yeah, in fact, what we're looking at is the fact that those waves they're coming. You don't really see them that much when you're out in the middle of the ocean, but as you get closer to land, that's when things start to stack up, which is why we're watching that. I think we're going to see more sneaker waves. On the West Coast more than anything, which is why the advice is don't be at the beach today. You just want to be at higher ground, but we're really just looking at don't be in the water, don't be on the beach. That's where we'll see the problems if we see them.
And to me, this is a great visualization. You see that natural curve. That's the tide cycle. That's the normal up and down that you see every day. That tsunami is where you start to see it going up and down. These waves could last as much as 5 to 15 minutes as they come ashore. So you can see the 1 minute, the 16-minute, the 20-minute observations where you see it not just go up, you also see it go down before it goes up at some point in time, exposing that seabed, exposing the beach out there, but then you get the much higher wave. So while it may look like, okay, it's only 1 to 2 feet above low mean water levels, you see it go down first, and then it's that crashing effect, and it keeps happening. It's not just once, it keeps going. So we're still seeing those small waves impacting all coastlines of the Hawaiian Islands and the West Coast.
The most important cue, if you see the water receding very quickly away, that's when you need to run to higher ground and as fast as you possibly can because that's when you have problems. Now, I grew up in Southern California, right on the coast, and also in Oregon. So we grew up when we would actually have tsunami drills, because we were in school. And so to me, growing up, it was just kind of a normal thing where the sirens go off and you have to go and be in a safe place. So it's one of these situations where most likely everyone's going to be fine.
Yes.
But if you make a bad decision to go into the water or, that's what we're trying to avoid. Again, we want to hear from you as well, especially if you're on the West Coast or even if you're in Hawaii. Now, right now, it's really, really early in the morning. It's in the middle of the night in Hawaii, but we'd love to hear from you if you're there as well, what your experience has been. My daughter is actually there right now in Maui. She's on her honeymoon. Last night, as soon as I got the notice that we had not only just the fact that we had the earthquake, but the tsunami things were happening, I immediately started texting her. My wife started calling her, make sure that because they were at the beach.
Yeah, and it's another hot one in Honolulu. You can see this video is from yesterday, actually. So we'll probably see a little bit more intense waves there. But right now, I want to switch to another major top story.
Huge. And this is going to impact a lot more people than the tsunami will.
Yeah, tens of thousands, actually tens of millions.
150 million.
Yes, and so meteorologist Tracy Anthony is giving us all the details about what we can expect out of the heat. Tracy, how are you doing? Because we had cooler weather. We were cool and humid yesterday, totally different for us. But I mean, Florida, wellness check.
Yeah,
Yeah,
big
you
time.
know, I'm kind of used to it now after 2 years down here, but this is extreme. You know, we're talking all-time heat index records in Tampa. 119 degrees was
Ouch.
that feel-like temperature. So this is way above that threshold of what's normal. And as Jim and Carissa were mentioning, it's impacting hundreds of millions of people across the nation. So we are going to start to see some changes here over the next day, day and a half. But for today, still heat advisories from Boston all the way down through Fort Myers, areas like Orlando, and then all the way over west to Oklahoma City and the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So we have a ton of heat advisories and extreme heat warnings, and it's feeling even warmer with the dew points or the moisture content in the environment. So it's really hard for your body to keep cool. So we've kind of been wanting to know, what have you been doing to find ways to beat the heat? Because this has been around for a couple of days now.
A couple of days and a couple more days and a couple more days after that.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten into August, but we're right in the heart of the dog days of summer for sure, Tracy. And you've got that deep dive we were talking about too, which I'm really interested in. At 20 past the hour, we're going to talk a little bit more about the impacts on the power grid, because it's suffering. It's really struggling right now.
And we're also going to look at a poll that we've taken, yes, and what people have said, how you're feeling about it, also how to deal with it. So that's also coming up. Coming up, by the way, we want to hear from you. You click on the QR code, you go to your favorite social media platform, join us. Coming up, we're talking with our favorite hurricane hunter, Josh Morgerman, about the tropical season. Welcome back. It's that time of year where we're talking tropical weather. We'd like to have you join the conversation. Click on the QR code and you can go to any of your favorite social media platforms where we will answer your questions and interact with you. You can even just complain about the weather if you'd like to as well. So joining me now to talk about what's going on in the tropics is my favorite hurricane hunter, Josh Morgerman. Josh, how are you doing today?
Dr. Jim, always great to see you. You brighten my day.
Well, you're very kind. Okay, let's just get right into it. Right now, where is the active weather going on in the tropics?
Well, weirdly enough, it seems to be in the Central Pacific, which is, I feel that this is the basin that no one really talks about. You know, in the Western Pacific, we get typhoons, and sometimes those really make the news. Obviously, as Americans, we follow what's going on in the Atlantic. Sometimes we even look at what's happening in the Eastern Pacific, because those storms can go into Mexico and then cause, rain issues in the United States. We almost never talk about the Central Pacific, but that's what's on fire right now. Multiple named storms in that zone of the Pacific that includes Hawaii.
Yeah, and most of the time we call these fish storms, because they really are out in the middle of nowhere. There's not that many islands. And once you get south of Hawaii, it gets pretty barren very quickly. But what impacts could it actually, or they, because again, it's a number of different systems, how could they impact Hawaii?
Well, fortunately, the current cluster of systems are way, way south of the islands, so it looks like they're going to be just fine. But I should also point out that there's this sort of common misconception that Hawaii is a hurricane-prone area. I guess just maybe because it's in the tropics. It's a tropical island. It's got palm trees. It looks like it should get hurricanes, but it really doesn't. Now, there have been a couple of fluke incidents of Hawaii getting hurricanes, and of course, the one that everyone refers to is Category 4 Iniki, of 1992, which smashed Kauai. And there have been a couple of other events over the last 100 years, but generally hurricanes have a hard time getting to Hawaii. The sort of the water temperatures, the upper air patterns around the islands are generally fairly hostile to hurricanes. So while it can happen, the islands usually get off pretty easy, usually.
Well, and also having been there myself, the water really isn't all that warm. I mean, when you get into the water around Hawaii, it's cold at first, whereas opposed to if you get into the Gulf, it's like bath water this time of year.
Exactly. Water temperatures are everything. I learned this. I remember, I grew up in New York and then I moved to LA. And I remember in LA going to the beach, and you're on this beach with palm trees, and it's hot out, and you dip your foot into the Pacific off of Los Angeles and it's freezing. It's like, whoa, even in July. And that's when I really understood why the West Coast of the United States does not get hurricanes. It's just the water is really cold. And it's not that cold off Hawaii, but it's not like the Gulf. It's not like our southeastern coast where we've got that bath water, which really turbocharges tropical cyclones.
Boy, you could really feel a difference. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, well, let's talk about the Atlantic for just a little bit because, I mean, it's been quiet. It looks quiet for now, but we know that it's going to change at some point.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, even folks who are savvy to hurricanes, like my neighbors down here in Mississippi, they're all saying to me, God, it's a quiet hurricane season, isn't it? Isn't it quiet? Folks, for some reason, there's this collective amnesia every year. Folks forget that hurricane season does not coincide with peak summer. It's actually after. So right now we're in peak summer. We're getting the heat waves and everything else. Hurricane season really starts a little later. And climatologically, when it really gets going is around August 10th. So right now, yeah, it has been a little quiet and a little quieter than some previous years. So it has this feeling that the season isn't getting going when actually we're pretty much on schedule right now.
Yeah, I call it lag time because at this point, we've already reached the peak of the amount of sunshine that we get, and it starts to taper off slowly. Not so much around the equator, of course, but it's just like cooking. You cook some cookies, you take them out of the oven, they're still cooking for a while, and so the same sort of thing is happening. I think the water's cooking, things are quiet, and so once things sort of kind of gel out, we're going to see things pop, and it would be my opinion that we'd see them pop very quickly.
Absolutely. And that's such a good way of putting it. The lag time, it's like with the sort of water temperatures and everything else. I've been looking at the computer models nonstop, as I'm sure you have. And what's interesting is it's really, they're all over the place. Each model is showing different things, and then they show different things run to run. It's hard to get any kind of a sense of consistency about what might pop or where. But the models, especially the ensemble models, which show a lot of different scenarios at once, they are suggesting that things are going to get more active and that there could be some threats maybe off the southeast coast in the mid to long range. They're sort of they're vague hints, but they're
Yeah.
some of what the ensemble models are indicating. And climatologically, they're right on schedule because they're showing that happening in early to mid August.
I've actually been kind of seeing two things. One off the East Coast that might actually go away from the U.S. coastline, possibly. And again, these are long distance, way out there. And now what I am seeing, though, that has my attention a little bit more, I'm seeing more tropical waves coming off of Africa. And they seem to kind of stick together a little bit. Don't become organized, but they're kind of out there.
Yep, yep. And this is the time of year as we get into August, especially to late August, those African systems are the ones we really have to watch. Some of the greatest hurricanes in American history were started from systems that came off Africa and made that trek across the Atlantic and then somehow found their way to us because they didn't get to recurve out into the open Atlantic.
Yeah, so it's something we will continue to watch for. And what we're going to watch for right now is we'd like you to join us online. Click on the QR code here and go online where you can ask questions of me and Josh about the coming hurricane season. Of course, we're going to be right back after this little break, and we're going to continue this conversation with my favorite hurricane hunter.
All right. Thanks, Jim and Josh, for that. We've got so much happening in the tropics, especially in the Pacific, the Eastern and Central Pacific. And we've been talking so much about Hawaii with relation to those. But then, of course, Mother Nature decided to throw in a massive earthquake in Russia that triggered tsunami warnings and advisories for Alaska, Hawaii, and the entire West Coast.
We're talking historic numbers here. 8.8. In fact, that's just preliminary. But we actually saw a lot of problems in Russia. Now, this is a look at Hawaii. Not quite so bad, but still under that tsunami advisory.
Yes, it is still hanging out this morning. The big threat started around 7:10, 7:15-ish Hawaii Standard Time last night. That's when they expected that first round of waves to come through. But you can see what the power of water did in Russia after the earthquake. So they saw earthquake damage, and then they saw some inundation on other coastlines.
And of course, I have kind of a personal side note here. My daughter is on her honeymoon right now in Maui.
Poor Emmy.
And last night, right about when this all was going on, I got on my phone and texted her immediately, said, do you know about the tsunami warning? Do you know where you are and where you should be? And honestly, I was really proud of her. She already knew about everything, and they were already heading higher ground. In fact, Hawaii, they were on top of this. So
100%.
as soon as those advisories started coming out and they were under a tsunami warning at one point, they had the sirens going every hour and a reminder for everybody that this was not going to be something that was a short-lived thing, that it was going to be a long-term thing. At this point anyway, the peak waves have been about 5 feet, almost 6 feet, which for Hawaii, that's really not a bad thing. But you don't know. You don't know until it actually happens what it will actually be like.
And Charlotte Clark on our Facebook page, I think she put it perfectly. Please, please don't let your curiosity get the better of you, because that water moves faster than you can run. So get yourself to high ground and heed those warnings. And it was really interesting not only to hear the story from Emmy, your daughter, but also to kind of see other people's reactions from the sirens yesterday.
Trying to get home. It's gridlocked. Freaking cars for miles. You literally don't move. It's crazy. Surfers out there trying to catch that tsunami wave.
There is no way.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
Okay,
Did you hear the little voice of the Mommy, is it going to be okay? My full heart just broke.
Now, of course, they were in the right place.
Right,
I mean,
they were right where they should be.
I was getting a little airsick. Got to admit, moving around the camera just a little bit. But you know what? They actually came up with a really important point. Okay, a lot of times people don't try to evacuate until they start to see something happening. Right. But in Hawaii, they were moving. Everybody was moving, and again, they had gridlock, so they still had to get around that. So. It's just one of these things where we talk about being weather aware.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to be ocean aware too, even more so.
And prepared to know what to do, so that when that alert comes out, you're immediately action.
Yeah.
And not, wait, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to handle this? But after talking about what's been happening in Alaska, Hawaii, the West Coast with the tsunami, we also want to get folks ready to go out the door this morning. And so I want to bring in meteorologist Tracy Anthony. Tracy, tell us what we've got people stepping out into to start off the day today.
Yeah, most of us are pretty calm and quiet, obviously. A lot of us dealing with the heat, but we do have some strong and severe thunderstorms rolling through Iowa into northern Illinois and even into Wisconsin. So Milwaukee, a line of strong storms working across the region. Iowa City, you're in the kind of stratiform rain behind the leading edge of the front. But we do have a cluster that's impacting areas like Burlington, Fort Madison, Iowa, just pushing across the border. So this is moving pretty slow, and that's why we're going to have the concern for flooding. We do have the flood watch that is in place through the start of the day on Thursday, so we're expecting several more rounds of rain showers and storms here across the Central Plains over the next 36 hours. So flooding going to be kind of that ongoing threat, Chris and Jim. And it's also the heat, but finally that heat is starting to break down. So that is some good news, at least for the northern areas.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, millions of people, are happy to hear the fact that some of that heat is going to move just a little bit. All right. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for keeping us abreast of what's going on with the weather there. Coming up now, we're going to still be talking to you online, and we want to have you join the conversation. Click on this QR code, go to your favorite social media platform, and there you can find us. Now, coming up, we're going to be talking more with Josh Morgerman, my favorite hurricane hunter. Plus, we're going to be talking more about tsunami and heat, and we got all kinds of things, so stay with us here on Weather Nation. Welcome back. Let's continue the conversation online and on the air. Click on the QR code here, go to your favorite site, and join us online. Ask us your questions. What are you thinking about with the hurricane season? Anything is on the table. Of course, joining me again for a few more minutes here, Josh Morgerman, my favorite hurricane hunter. Josh, so we've been talking about the activity. It's kind of active in the Pacific, it's quiet in the Atlantic for now anyway. But what's the one thing we know that we can look forward to as we deal with the heat here during the summertime?
Well, that heat, which we're really feeling down the Gulf Coast, especially the eastern part of the Gulf Coast. Wow, look at those temperatures out of Tampa. I mean, crazy stuff. That is helping to keep the Gulf nice and warm. And right now, it's been, up to now, it's been basically an untapped resource. There's that sort of heat content buildup, which we have to worry about because if a good hurricane gets over those waters, look out. The fuel is there.
It kind of reminds me of popcorn. In the old days, before we had microwaves, you put a little oil in the pan and you put it on there, you put them on there, and you watch it, it gets hotter, then it explodes. Well, and honestly, that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. If we do see something happen, it will go very quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And, climatologically, we're getting into that time of year. August is when it's really game on for the United States. When you look at American hurricane history, a lot of the worst hurricanes in our history, Katrina, Camille, Ida, Laura, Harvey, were August hurricanes. So this is the time of year where we really have to keep an eye peeled.
Yeah, it's certainly not time to relax and say this is going to be a slow year. So, yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to share with us before we let you go for the day?
Yeah, one other point. A couple of very big recent seasons that were devastating for the United States, like 2022 and 2024, were also late starters, okay? The years that brought us Ian, Helene, Milton, those were also years that started very slow and then exploded late with devastating consequences. So don't feel like we're out of the woods. We're not even in the woods yet.
Yeah, that's actually a good way of putting it. Well, Josh, thanks for taking the time with us today. Always love spending our time together. And it's funny that the time just flies when we're talking hurricanes.
It does. Good to see you, Dr. Jim.
You too. Now, speaking of heat, now we've got obviously tropical heat, but we got a lot of heat in the eastern half of the country, especially. Tracy Anthony has a little more detail on what's going on and what we expect over the next several days.
Yeah, we have over 135 million people under heat alerts or heat advisories of some sort. And we've been under these heat advisories for days on end. So what does that do to the power grid? Because it increases demand. And it actually causes the power plants to generate power less efficiently because of the warm temperatures. So it puts a lot of strain on the infrastructure, where we can even have power lines sagging or transformers that malfunction. And really, it can cause issues. And that's why you do hear every now and then with heat waves that the power does go out, or we have blackouts, or we have to do rolling brownouts. So with heat, especially paired with humidity, it's an increase in demand. Everybody bumps up their AC, and power plants are less efficient. Even water hydro plants are less efficient when the water is warmer. So they're not as efficient as generating power if the water has a higher temperature. And then as we stay warm throughout the overnights, it's that constant draw on power that causes those grids to not have time to have a break or cool down. So that's a lot of stress on the infrastructure. So that's just a little bit more in detail about how that impacts you day to day. So that heat is going to stick around, but finally some cooler temperatures in the forecast for the northern parts of the Great Lakes, at least. So, Jim, that's definitely some good news, but kind of interesting to see how that heat impacts other layers and not just what you feel when you step outside.
Yeah, you really do have to look at the broader picture and not just one tiny area. And boy, when you have, like you were talking about, half of the East Coast is all under those kinds of advisories, that is definitely going to be a problem. Thank you, Tracy. Well, coming up, we're going to change gears just a little bit. We're going to talk about derechos, or a derecho in particular, as we had some pretty big storms that were causing all kinds of problems earlier in the week.
Yeah, we saw widespread damaging wind alerts. And I mean, maybe we're just weather nerds. I mean, that I know for sure. But it's for us, it's a very important definition, because that's just the differentiation between what's your average overnight thunderstorm cluster. I'm from the Midwest. That's called July. You just have those overnight thunderstorms night after night. But when you start talking about a derecho, check out this video. This is the blinding rain. This is one of the people in the video said, our tree has now been completely bent over. That is where you start to see widespread damage, especially at a time of year when crops are so important. They have had a great summer and they are flourishing across much of Iowa and South Dakota and Minnesota. And then you get these damaging wind and hailstorms that could ruin an entire season in one night.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that a derecho has that kind of damage and those kinds of winds, not just for 5, 10, 20, 100, over 250 miles. So that, I mean, we're talking about a huge area that wind complex has to keep going and cause damage. And in essence, at times has to produce hurricane force type winds that will then obviously cause the issues. So as we look at this, well, you can really see where we had the problems stretching from about Bismarck all the way down to Des Moines and even over close to Chicago.
And this is over the last 3 days. So it was night after night after night and relentless. And with the pattern, we talked about everything interconnected. We have more severe weather on the way for a lot of the same areas. And we're going to be talking about that forecast in just a bit.
Yeah, so stay with us. Click on the QR code and you can join the conversation online where we want to hear what you have to say. Stay with us. Good morning. Welcome to WeatherNation. We today are talking about all things from the tsunami, the heat, the derechos. I mean, we've got all kinds of things going on with weather today, weather and even non-weather things. We are also live on all of our social media platforms, and we want to hear from you. So join us. Click on the QR code. You can go to your favorite social media platform, and that's where you can interact with us and ask questions or comments. And we're going to be talking about that throughout the rest of the hour, too.
Yeah, we've had several people chime in talking about how they're beating the heat. Bobby Storm, I think AC isn't a choice, but a necessity. I agree there.
And coming from Bobby Storm, Storm, okay, already I'm going to give you a little bit more credit because you got Storm in your name. Therefore, yeah, I agree.
Jerry on Facebook, sleep is what I do. When it's just too hot, your body is just kind of, at least hopefully then it can regulate itself and just relax a little bit.
I get grumpy, and I realize that I might be grumpy all the time, but I really do get grumpy, not just when it's hot and humid. And the fact that I lived in Houston for 25 years, that was, I had to work on it. I had to adjust my attitude quite a bit during that time.
Well, and it's funny because just a couple of days ago, we're in Denver and it was about 98 degrees. Yesterday morning, it was much, much cooler. Yesterday, we only got up into the 70s, but it was crazy. And I want to bring in meteorologist Tracy Anthony because I think she's going to make fun of me, and that's okay because I deserve it. Tracy, the dew point here was 66 degrees. That is so out of the ordinary for us, and it's part of monsoon season. So we do see it this time of year, but the 66 degrees with temperatures in the 70s, I don't think my hair has recovered.
Yeah, it might take a couple of days, but I get that. When I lived in Denver and would fly to Florida, it was like, it just hits you like a a cloth or a sweatshirt when you step out into that air mass. That's why we say it's air you can wear, because it's so heavy with the moisture content. And we've had this moisture content available in the air mass all the way up to the Great Lakes, and it's stuck around. So that's what's driving the heat and humidity. It's also driving the storms. So we do have a line of storms that we're tracking, and we do have one little cluster or portion of that line that has been severe warned. It's for winds up to 60 miles per hour, but this should be dropping off here any minute now. So that looks like this line is definitely starting to weaken as it progresses to the southeast very slowly. So it's wringing out a good amount of moisture, but it's the slow nature of the motion that's going to keep flash flooding a big concern. If we take a look across areas like Iowa over the last 2 days, we've had rainfall totals up to 5-6 inches. So the ground is already extremely saturated for these localized spots that have been hit pretty hard the last couple of days. We do have some flood watches for the Front Range of Colorado, all the way down into New Mexico, and even areas of Montana under some flood watches. As for the rest of the country, we do have a flash flood warning, it looks like, that was issued for areas of Mississippi. So again, it's these slow moving systems that are wringing out a bunch of the moisture. So we'll continue to track what's going on radar here. Let's take you out to Honolulu, Hawaii, and talk about that tsunami.
Siren. We hear a siren, we think a tornado, but no, not when you're next to the beach.
Yeah, this was the sound last night when the earthquake first happened and the tsunami advisories and warnings were first being issued. That's when the sirens started to alert people and say, move away from higher ground. Then every hour, on the hour, they would air those sirens out again to make sure that everybody knew, everybody heard, because it's hours between when you know that there's a potential impact and to when the impacts start.
Yeah, and one of the challenges with tsunamis is that a lot of times you really can't know or tell how big the waves are going to be once they make shore. Now, I will say this, in Hawaii, what's working in their favor is the fact that the water is deep all around there. And so you tend to see waves get bigger as the waves get closer to land and the ground gets closer and closer. So that space between the depth of the ocean gets less, and that's when the waves start to stack up. So Hawaii, being surrounded by very deep water, it tends not to be quite as bad as other places. Not always, though, because like I said, you can't always tell.
Well, and something else that was very interesting to me, when we talk about swells and waves with tropical systems, and we were talking about how currents all the way in and around New Zealand were impacting the southern shores of Hawaii. With a tsunami, you'll notice that all of the advisories and all of the alerts are pretty much all the way around the island, because the entire system is impacted, because what goes up must come down, and you see that with wave action too, and it kind of will wrap around and impact a much larger scope of coastal areas.
And one of the things that you don't know is where the earthquake actually happened. What happened? Did the ground just shake? Or did the ground shake and then move? And so you had this huge area of land that moved. That's what creates the wave that makes the tsunami. Not just the fact that it was shaking, but that you had basically a landslide at the bottom of the ocean.
And what I want to talk about too is just how big this earthquake was. An 8.8 magnitude. That is one of the top 10 strongest earthquakes that we've seen, and certainly the strongest since 2011.
Oh, ever. So it's in the top six. It's tied with for 6, 7, and 8. So there's 3 that were at the same at 8.8, but that's in history. So we're talking about historically bad from the very beginning.
Right. And then you talk about, well, what kind of earthquake is it? What were the plates doing? How does that impact the entire water system? And that's not just the waters in and around, because they did see some higher waves in the coastal areas of Russia. They saw tsunami impacts in Japan. And then we saw it kind of spreading out from there. So the Aleutian Islands had tsunami warnings in Alaska. We had farther east of there on the southern coast of Alaska, the tsunami advisories. But then we had warnings in Hawaii. We had warnings in the northern California coast into this morning.
And even had advisories all the way into Japan. So we're talking anywhere where that wave could have had an impact on them, that's where we had those advisories. And they are still posted because it doesn't just happen at one event. It's a series of waves that come through. And that's why we're going to keep our eye on it for the rest of today, certainly. Hey, another top story. Okay, it's July. We're talking heat. How about just the opposite of heat?
Just the opposite, a big cool down. It's funny, here on top of Pikes Peak, not far away from where we are, they had snow the other day. We've had so much moisture in the atmosphere. It's monsoon season for the desert Southwest, so we see that return flow coming in from the Gulf of Mexico. The setup with that huge ridge of high pressure continues to pull that moisture in, but you've got cooler air coming in from the north. So pretty much east of the Rockies into the northern plains, the Great Lakes in the northeast, big changes on the way.
Well, and we'll give you a little help too. Pikes Peak is over 14,000 feet.
That
so
also
that makes a big difference up there. I actually, from my house, I could see Pikes Peak. And so when I looked out and I went, what is that white stuff at the top of the, oh my goodness, it's snow.
And now we have to talk about who else is going to see that cooler air throughout the depth of the atmosphere. And that is much of the northern U.S., where we have this trough that's digging in, and that's going to allow for that cooler air to spill south. So we're talking 10, 15, 20 degree temperature difference here in the next couple of days.
So all these people that have been on the outer edge of that dome of high pressure where we've seen just the high temperatures that have just been oppressively hot, the only thing that's going to make a change is a movement in the atmosphere, a big move, and in this case it's going to be this area of low pressure in Canada pulling down that cooler air. Now, not everybody's going to get in on it,
right,
but it's really the northern part, the northern half of the country. For all of our friends in the South, I'm sorry, it's too early. It's still going to be hot.
Not there yet. The Mid-South is probably where that kind of cuts off. So we'll see those temperatures going from the 90s to the 70s in the Northeast, and that's going to bring in some cooler air. But we were just talking about monsoon season, and that breaks my heart, the fact that we still have flood alerts in New Mexico.
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of these where the flooding is happening is where we had fires, not just in the last year, but the last 5-6 years or so, and where you have the burn scars, you get a couple of inches of rainfall, and this is what you get.
And so we continue with flash flood watches across parts of New Mexico and into Colorado. Burn-scarred areas like we saw in Ruidoso, especially susceptible. Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, no kidding. And you know, it's interesting. So the big area high pressure that's causing all the problems with the heat, as we were talking about that low coming in and pushing that out of the way, it's also the same feature that's pulling in that moisture from the south, which is the monsoon moisture. And so that one giant feature is having an impact on the majority of the United States right now.
So we have flood alerts in effect across parts of the Four Corners. We also could be talking about some severe storms, especially when that upslope flow, when that warm, moist air comes in with that southerly and easterly component, it goes straight up the higher elevations. And what happens when you see rising air? Condensation, cloud development, precipitation. It's the water cycle, baby.
Well, and then on the northern end of that, because we were talking about that area of low pressure, that's the storms that come out of Canada. Now, they're not like the winter storms, but compared to like 100-degree temperatures with 80% humidity, it is cooler air, and those two things don't mix, and so they run together, and that's why we have the severe weather. Typically, the Midwest, the northern plains, and that's exactly what we're going to probably see again.
And so we've got this same ridge of high pressure that's causing so many different facets of our forecast. We've got the extreme heat. We've got the moisture in the monsoon season. We've got the severe weather on the northern side of it, all of it coming together and all of it interconnected, and all of it kind of having fringe impacts. So I want to bring in meteorologist Tracy Anthony, because those fringe impacts of the heat are having major effects on our bodies.
Yeah, and some of the large metro areas feel the most impacts. And that's because of, the urban heat island, the temperatures warm up a little more, but also with the pollution and ozone with that heat. So you can kind of see here when it looks a little hazy and a little smoggy, that's what a lot of these major metros are going to be dealing with throughout the afternoon hours. So oftentimes when we have the heat alerts, we also have some air quality alerts. And really why that is because when you have the heat advisories, we typically have a ridge of high pressure, and with high pressure you have sinking air. And that sinking air traps the pollutants, the ozone, your vehicle exhaust, smoke and dust in the city limits. And we don't usually have gusty winds to really mix up that air. And then on top of it, you add the sunlight that causes a chemical reaction to some of those emissions, and it produces more ground level ozone. In other words, more smog. So that is why you feel the impacts. If you have any lung conditions or if you have asthma, it may be difficult when you go outside when you have those heat advisories in place. Chris and Jim.
That's right. And we'll be talking more about your top weather stories in just a second. Live on air. Make sure you join us.
Oh, and we are live now here on Weather Nation, and we are, of course, having our conversations online as well as on television. So if you click on the QR code, you can go online to your favorite social media platform. You can make your comments. People have given us some complaints or some things that they should do about the heat,
Yeah.
which obviously makes a lot of sense this time of year. We got the heat going on. And joining us also is meteorologist Tracy Anthony.
Yes.
She's kind of been handling the top stories and also that heat.
And digging in deeper to them. But I want to say a thank you to Janine McWhorter, who's in Texas. She's saying the heat is brutal. She's doing everything she can to stay cool and making sure to take breaks when she is outside and staying hydrated. I mean, it's easy, it's simple, but it could, like little stuff like that could save your life, because when you're thirsty and you stop sweating, it's too late.
Yeah, you are already behind. And I love the fact that she's in Texas. So yes, I truly understand that too. You don't when you get down there for the first time and you get slapped in the face by the humidity, you're like, oh yes, now I know what they're talking about.
And I want to give a shout out too to Jerry Saffel. Our steel workers in Carlinville, Illinois, they have to put up with the heat because even inside the building where they work, he says it feels like it's 10 degrees hotter in the summer, plus the humidity on condenser on the floors. It makes it slick to walk. So even when you're inside, it's not just having an effect on us when we're outside, but also it's difficult to keep your house cool. The temperatures overnight aren't dropping that much. So your AC is working overtime, and there just really is no relief.
And that's the humidity. The humidity is what makes that stay. So when you have humid air, it doesn't cool down fast, it doesn't heat fast, but once it gets one of those ways, hot or cold, it stays that way for a long time, and you can really feel it.
And the heat and humidity has been fueling storms across the country. And a couple nights ago, Monday night, we saw some incredible storms. In Sioux Center, Iowa, a 99-mile-per-hour wind report. Now, I don't think that's when this video was taken, but still, if this was them on a good night, that's where we have a problem.
Yeah, and so a lot of people, they hear the word derecho,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have a lot of meaning other than it's really a bad thing. So I think we need to have a little education, and giving us a little education on that right now, Tracy Anthony. So tell us a little bit about derechos and maybe help people understand them just a little bit better.
Yeah, these are long duration wind events, and it all depends kind of how that structure of thunderstorms is organized. And I think people only know that word once they've experienced it for themselves. And that's what Carissa was talking about Monday night into Tuesday. We had this cluster of thunderstorms that rolled through the Dakotas into Minnesota and Iowa, and we had a large swath of strong damaging winds. So a derecho criteria is a swath of at least 250 miles long. So this cluster of storms holds together, and we have numerous reports of winds over 58 miles per hour and several reports of winds over 75 miles per hour. So we were starting to do some of that research to kind of check out if the cluster of storms Monday night into Tuesday was in fact considered a derecho as it moved through the area. So the blue dots are all of the wind reports, and the damage did stretch for 450 miles. And that's where we had winds surpassing 58 miles per hour. So it is very large, and those winds can be very damaging. As Carissa was mentioning, we had winds at 99 miles per hour. So that can be more damaging in some cases than other severe weather impacts. So we'll continue to have the update on that. And I think now the Storm Prediction Center is classifying Monday night's cluster of storms as a derecho, as it did move across the area. So it really all depends on that criteria. And it is the time of year where we typically see these wind events occurring. So it really kind of depends on who you are and where you live. I know a lot of people in the Mid-Ohio Valley have been through that, so they know what that word is, and they definitely heed the warnings. But it's all these storms that have been driven up around this ridge of high pressure. So the ridge is bringing us the heat. It's kind of trapping that heat in place, and then that moisture is transported around it, and that's what's giving us that setup for the long-term wind events. So we're still going to continue to watch these same areas, Jim and Carissa, over the next couple of days. But yeah, it's definitely been one for the books for severe weather this week.
Well, and there's so many criteria for a derecho. I mean, seriously, I got to get my measurements. I got to get the wind speeds. I got to get the timing. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
I call it purposefully overwhelming,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's something that they have to go back and itemize.
Nitpick.
Yes.
It's nitpicking.
Exactly, to make sure that what's subjective is not. But that, as Tracy said, will be one for the weather history books.
And you know I love history. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, is to look at weather history. So here's a look. On this day, July 30th, 1979, in Fort Collins, Colorado, they had a 45-minute hailstorm. Can you believe that? A hailstorm 45 minutes long. This, by the way, this picture is courtesy of the Coloradan. And by the way, okay, now I've been in hailstorms. Now, we live in Colorado now, so it does happen all the time, but a 5-minute long hailstorm is damaging.
It's enough to cover the ground.
This was 45 minutes. Dozens of people were injured, and there was actually one fatality as well, which doesn't happen very often with hail. And by the way, I want to know your weather history.
Yes.
Please join us online. Join us on the chat right now, or you can send us your pictures or your questions later about weather history. What's the worst storm you've been in? What's been something that you had to go through that was weather related that you want to share with us, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things, to hear people's stories and the lessons that they learned, because that's what we want to share with you. What we want to give you is news you can use. And sometimes, if you've sat down with a grandparent and heard their stories, that's the best way to learn.
Oh, and if you have pictures, please share them
Even better.
as well. So join us online. Click on the QR code here. Go to your favorite social media platform, and you can ask us questions. Of course, we will continue to answer, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Okay, now let's go back to probably the biggest story of the day, which we just can't keep going back, which is funny because it's huge, but really only the worst it's been in some very rural areas in Russia at this point. Of course, I'm talking about the tsunami.
Yeah, so if you're just waking up, you're just joining us, there was an 8.8 magnitude earthquake in Russia last night. That set off a tsunami, which you can see some of the water impacts in Russia here on this video. But then, also shout out to tsunami.gov, to the tsunami alert system, because it worked immediately from Alaska to Hawaii, the entire West Coast, Japan, and across the world. Everybody said, all right, here's who could potentially be impacted. Now, those initial alerts were a little scary, because you don't know, is it going to be just a small impact, or could we be talking about massive waves and inundation?
You don't know.
That's when the calculations start.
Hey, and by the way, if you want to know, the worst hurricane ever, or the most powerful hurricane, was in 1960. It was a 9.5 earthquake.
Most powerful earthquake.
Did I say hurricane?
You said hurricane.
I
It's
did.
okay.
It is tropical
Occupational
season.
hazard.
Give me, well, and I am a weather geek. So, okay, 9.5 earthquake. Can you believe that? 9.5. This is 8.8. And by the way, every time you go up a number, it's 10 times worse than the last one. So it's exponentially bad. So this is one of the top. Right now it's 6, but the 6, 7, and 8 are all tied at 8.8. So it is historically one of the worst hurricanes as far as powerful.
And so we watched as that spread out. Some of the tsunami impacts started around 7 p.m. local time in Hawaii, around 11, 12, 1 a.m. overnight in the mainland U.S. And we saw the sirens going off to alert people, hey, you need to get away from the water. You need to get to higher ground. And thankfully, people heeded the warnings, but we still have those alerts out there to start off the day because a tsunami is not one wave. It's continuous impacts kind of over and over.
Also, I don't think I said where that earthquake was. It was in Chile in 1960, by the way. And yes, now, of course, we've been talking also a little bit about my daughter. Can you imagine? So she goes on her honeymoon.
Her honeymoon.
And so far, her luggage got lost. She still doesn't have luggage. She hasn't had luggage for several days now, which is kind of fun. But you know what? If you're in Hawaii, by the way, she went to college in Hawaii, so
Okay, so she
she's got the aloha spirit. And if you don't know what that means she doesn't matter. So she's having a ball, but she is buying all sorts of stuff, and will make the airline pay for it, which I think is actually kind of funny.
But you know what? I'm going to go with this. They say it's good luck if it rains on your wedding day. So, I mean, a tsunami on your honeymoon, they're going to be the best couple ever, which if I know anything about them, that's already.
They kind of are. I know that's true. But I was worried. I mean, you know, when as soon as we heard about the hurricane,
the tsunami,
and the earthquake. This is terrible.
Natural
the earthquake,
disaster.
you know, we're on the phone texting her immediately about that. I mean, you know, we're still parents, you know, I can't help it. But in fact, what was good to know, though, that she and everybody else were on the top floors of where their hotels were. And so everybody, it seemed like they really knew what to do. And it's a great example for all of us.
And do me a favor, Jim, Paris Johnson on our Facebook page, she said that she has lost luggage in Hawaii too. But also, if you would just reiterate where the worst earthquake was, when and where that happened for everybody at home.
9.5, it was 1960 in Bio, Chile. It's as good as I could do. I'm terrible at Spanish. But the second one was in Alaska, 1964. That was a 9.2. So
not out of the ordinary.
No, it happens. It happens.
And I feel like, do you remember it was a couple of months ago, there was a tsunami alert around San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a similar thing where it was like, okay, we know there's going to be some sort of impact. We don't know how big it's going to be. So everybody immediately evacuated the coastline, did what they were supposed to do, minimal impacts. And thankfully, the entire West Coast was under alerts last night. It's just probably from about San Luis Obispo north into Oregon that we still have those alerts. Still some tsunami advisories in parts of Alaska and Hawaii this morning too, but thankfully the impacts are going down.
And I'd like to take this opportunity also to remind anybody on the west coast of the United States is that the Ring of Fire, which is where the tectonic plates are still moving and there's a lot of activity, there's volcanoes in the ocean just off the coast of the United States on the west coast. We could have something like that could happen where you're not going to get a lot of warning. So in this case, it was when Russia came all the way across. We could see things that happened very quickly. So in other words, what I'm just trying to say, not to scare anybody, but if you live next to the coast, you need to have your idea and plan if there was a tsunami, what you would do, and not think about it once the water starts coming.
Right, because in one of our videos earlier, you saw traffic, and that's exactly what happened in San Francisco. Everybody out on the roads at once. So having multiple ways, this is the same for when there's a wildfire. I learned this from you. You can't just have one way to exit. You can't just have one way to go. You need to think of multiple different potential ways, because if there are impacts to the roads or you get caught in major traffic, you might want to look and see if there's another way around.
Most of the time when there's an evacuation, everybody's trying to leave at once.
Yep.
So if you're able to be a little bit ahead of that, or you know the back road or the side way or whatever, that might give you the advantage. So having a little bit of a plan is a good idea. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. We've had a lot of fun talking. We've been interacting with you. We got to talk with Josh today as well about the tropical season, and hopefully it continues to be quiet. I'm going to knock on wood or something. I know. Here at WeatherNation, we actually worry about it. Anytime we say it's quiet in hurricane season, it's not a good thing. All right. Hey, keep the conversation going, my friends. Again, there's that QR code where you can watch us on television. You can watch us online. We really appreciate it, and we're going to talk to you soon.